My name is Jerome Meadows, Director of Indigo Sky Community Gallery, and I'd like to welcome you again to the second episode of Art Talks, Art Matters, a monthly panel discussion about the art scene in Savannah as presented by local artists and others involved in this vibrant, expanding cultural community. We will use this program to showcase a variety of the artists who live and work here. And while the primary focus will be on the visual arts, we also will be showcasing noteworthy events of a cultural nature that you might be interested in checking out. Our panelists, and at times our moderator, will bring in a portfolio of a particular artist's work to share with you, to share with us, and with you, the viewing audience. We will be discussing that work while also taking a close look at the individuals responsible for creating it. All done with the objective of providing you with a fuller understanding of the motivation, methods, and materials of the artists who call Savannah home. We'll discuss ways of interpreting their creative expressions while taking into consideration the significance and the value of the art they've made. We certainly encourage you to seek out the individuals and organizations we showcase here. Find out more about them, and by all means, support them as best you can. The program format consists of myself as moderator, and I am joined for this second episode by our host, Mr. Chris Nitsche. And to give you just a little idea of who Chris is, if you weren't watching our first program, he received his Bachelor of Fine Arts degree at Northern Illinois University and his Master of Fine Arts degree at the University of New Mexico. His career includes over 65 solo and group shows. He is currently a professor of foundation studies at the Savannah College of Art and Design and a local artist of note and primarily a sculptor.
Primarily a sculptor.
Primarily a sculptor, yes. He has a fixation with ships, by the way. And the format is such that we will always have an invited guest for each of our 6 episodes. And we're delighted to have Miss Suzanne Jackson, local artist, born in St. Louis, Missouri. Suzanne graduated in 1961 from Monroe High School in Fairbanks, Alaska. And 1966 got her BA in art from San Francisco State University. She received in 1990 her MFA from Yale University School of Drama and Design. Suzanne's resume is extensive. So just to give you some brief ideas of her professional activity, she's had extensive solo exhibitions throughout the country and throughout the world. Temporary art agency in Richmond, New York, that was in 2015. 2013, Bird Music here at Indigo Sky Community Gallery. 2012, Local 1110, again here in Savannah. And 2010, did I say 2012? For Local 1110. In 2010, Danville Museum of Fine Art and History, Danville, Virginia. 2009, Philip J. Hamilton Gallery, Savannah State University. Robert First Center for the Arts, Richards and Westbrook Galleries, Georgia Tech University, Atlanta, Georgia. She has been involved in numerous museum exhibitions. She's been showing a lot.
It's good to be busy.
It's good to be busy.
Slow year.
So just to name a few of those, Williams College Art Museum in Williamstown, Massachusetts, MoMA PS1, I believe, Long Island, New York, Hammer Museum, Los Angeles, California, California African American Museum, Los Angeles. Pavilion of the National Association of Artists, Belgrade. Museum of Contemporary Art, Novi Sad.
Yes, that was a touring exhibition.
Okay.
Faculty from the painting department at SCAD.
Excellent.
Yes.
Albany Museum of Art, Suzanne Jackson and Peter Haas, Albany, Georgia. Recent American Watercolors, Peninsula Fine Arts Center, Newport News, Virginia. African American Artists in Los Angeles, a survey exhibition, California African American Museum. And just to name a few more. Ebony Museum, quote unquote, My Lord, What a Morning, Oakland, California. The Museum of African American History and Culture in Los Angeles. And numerous residencies and lectures and commissions. A busy, busy woman. She has and currently teaches at the Savannah College of Art and Design and uses drawing, painting, and dance as the means of her artistic expression. And I also remember seeing some poetry that you had written.
I have 2 books of poetry. I've been trying to finish the 3rd one.
Yes.
But other things have gotten in the way.
So just to let you know who we have at our table. And so again, the format is such that each of our hosts and our guests bring in work of the artist. We'll look at some of Suzanne's art later in the program. So we're going to throw it back to Chris. Who have you brought in today?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I brought in artwork by Henry Dean.
Okay.
And he is a professor in foundation studies at the Savannah College of Art and Design.
Okay.
Received his MFA from SCAD, but also his MA in Fine Arts and Geography from St. Andrews University in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
He has an abiding interest in geography. It's something that's very important to him, as well as landscape. And so he brings this forward with this particular work. And we take a look at his things, we can see about tying together the kind of work that he does.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, we can go to the first slide.
Henry Dean.
Yes, so he currently has an exhibition at the Cultural Arts Center on Henry Street.
Mm-hmm.
Called
Space Gallery.
At Space Gallery, and it's entitled Creeks and Folds. The folds refer to these particular works, which are plein air drawings and paintings that he created when, in 2014, he traveled through Scotland, the Isle of Skye, and was totally taken by what he considers to be the most amazing landscapes and seascapes to behold. So he would be drawing and painting on site within the region itself. And it's basically what we're looking at is about a 2-year project involving what began with here and then through this last summer as he continued doing work involving installation art. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This is an example of some of his studio paintings that he's working with. So,
And these are current.
These are current. These are oils. Okay. And it is work that he had been producing based off of the work he did at the Isle of Skye. So his painting style, which really always captured me, was like this really ethereal wonder to it. The landscape seems to be alluded to, but he certainly has an abiding love of non-objective art, like abstract expressionistic kind of art. It's the kind of mark makings that one would associate with that. So it seems that his process is so intuitive, and the intuitiveness seems to come through so nicely.
Well, if I may ask a quick question, you say these are based on those landscape renderings, but in this case, he's no longer really holding to the landscape.
I think it is his landscape. At least that's my take on it.
Okay.
I mean, do you see?
I see it because I love nature as well, and I can see the landscape there, and I can see how he's used that previous experience and those little studies to really begin to speak his own language in the studio in these.
I mean, what I really get from these is, and really what I find most engaging is the the density of it, but yet the colors give that density a playfulness, a lightness.
And the colors really seem to key in to colors he was picking up on
From the original.
Yes.
Okay.
But then there's more of like almost a personal language that gets layered in and carefully layered in.
And did you mention calligraphy at some point as being?
Well, if we go to the next one.
Okay.
The thing you're going to notice, you almost see words beginning in here, but they're really not words. You can and this is my take, of course.
Sure.
So forgive me, Henry. But it's something where almost like runes that seem to come through, like in places, but much like his take on an ethereal landscape, they sort of float in and they float back.
These rooms.
The runes.
Runes. Okay.
Runes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Like, something that almost goes back to like the Viking heritage.
I see.
Qualities, but it's these aspects where you do get some sense of a landscape beginning in it, but then it seems to veer away from that. So I find that I just travel. My eyes travel through the work.
Well, it also seems to be very much about the material, the paint, and how it's applied to the surface.
I mean, it's so many various mark makings, and oil. When it's oil on canvas, I mean, this is his favorite process as far as media that he does prefer to work with. Okay. And I feel that it allows him to give him like real extended time as the paint sort of manifests, and he has many days to make up his mind and to add to this. Okay. So with the next piece, I mean, this is a work that really, it almost looks as if there's a mixed media that's going into it. And the plays, like the dazzling reds and the dazzling yellows playing across this. I feel as if I'm looking across a field where I'm not certain if it's real, or the perception of it gets a little flipped. And I've been to his studio numerous times, and I've seen several of these works being developed. Okay. And he really speaks so poetically about it, too.
Okay, he does.
He certainly does.
Okay.
About his feelings, and if it's right or something else that would need to be coming to play with this. Okay. So if we just kind of finish up with these. Now this is the interesting break.
Same person.
Same person. I would call it a parallel track, but since 2003, being here in Savannah and being really keyed into the landscape, and our landscape are the tidal creeks, the marshes, this is the defining aspects of it. He has been going out into these places and placing canvases in the tidal creeks and allow the tide to wash in and wash out. So this is a few panels from a recent installation titled Sluice, and it is at the Port Royal Sound Foundation Maritime Center. It's in South Carolina off the Chechessie River. Okay. So these would be considered actual installations. Right. That you would visit basically by water. You could certainly visit by land to see it that way as well. And if we go to the next images, so you can see that over a 6.5-week period, the tide would come in, the tide would go out. He has his own mark makings on these pieces. Okay. But now it's getting infused with minerals, little microorganisms as over the weeks as they get washed in. Yes. So it's something where it's a real conceptual way of creating his versions of landscape art.
Well, letting the landscape literally create the work.
With an extended sense of time within this. I mean, it's not grand geographic time. If we could go to the next image to see like one of these where the tide is out now, and you can see the way some of these panels have been infused. So they really take on their own way of that kind of abstractions with the particular work. but there's a subtlety, such a carefulness to it too, when it comes to this. Can we go to the next one, please? So with this one, and we'll revisit this as we see the gallery show on this. But this is getting a little bit closer towards the end of the time there. So they're subtle pieces, but the striations within these, and as well as the kind of like effects, the actual landscape effects upon these particular panels. You know, that's the thing that really I find is so intriguing with the work.
Yeah.
So, like, if we can go to the next shot. So here are the panels themselves, several of them.
That currently on view at Space.
Currently on view.
Do you have the closing date on that offhand?
Since it opened on October 2nd, closing date is October 30th.
Okay.
So people will have plenty of time
to
go to catch the show, by all means. So with these, as far as like the reality that happened with them too, is like the infusion of landscape and time, the tears that happen on these. I mean, so it's something where they, they're damaged, but they're so real to me.
Yeah.
But it's just the kind of minerals that play into this and the processes that he feels he needs to go through in order to allow these to happen.
And I mean, the tears indicate that it's not just the surface responds to chemicals, but the physicality of the canvas is being impacted as well. I mean, the fact that it rips.
Indeed, and also like the saltiness of the water and like the shrinkage that happens. Some things that he can anticipate, others he cannot. With the next slide, this is where he took one of the previous ones we've seen.
Right, the last one we saw in...
Yeah, that was out on site.
Right.
And with all the extra canvas that he had, and he had planned to do this as far as unfurling it, taking it off of that frame, reframing it back into more of a standard rectangle.
Okay.
With the particular works this way. So now to see these, where there is, besides the front and the back, and what has happened to it, down to the rust from the staples going around there and having this kind of visual impact upon it. I mean, the non-objectivity brought into it so strongly.
Yeah.
But the landscape is so absolute and real with these particular works.
For me, the calligraphy that you were speaking of in the pieces from the studio is evident in this piece. I love this. It's really gorgeous, I think. And I keep thinking of Henry way back from maybe it was 2003. Immersed in the water,
you mean physically there?
Physically in the water with these pieces. And what I feel about the studio pieces, I can see all of that in those paintings. There are the stakes, and Henry is actually in the studio, in those paintings, in the water. That's what I feel. He's really totally submerged now in the studio, in the next phase, the next life of these, and I just, I think it's exquisite, actually.
Well, we've got 2 minutes left on this segment. You mentioned the calligraphy. Could you speak more about how you see that in this work?
I see it because, and I've also been I take things off the stretcher. I've moved them off, and those little tacks, he and I are probably one of the last people in the world who actually tack our canvases on, as opposed to using staples. And when you remove them, that little language that happens and the marks are part of the linear aspects that have to do with nature, have to do with the self, to me, in that. I really love this piece a lot because
your comment on the calligraphy also, I mean, where he's like so actively painting, he's so actively painting in the one manner, but here the calligraphy is something where it sort of goes beyond his control. But I could see where you would sort of feel that, because he does maintain a level of control, I feel, in the aesthetics that he creates with these particular works.
Well, I guess he knows the language that the process, the setting, speaks with. Exactly. And so there is an expectation of that, but then there is also, just letting it do what it wants to do. I suppose.
We could take a look at a couple of other
Yeah,
installation
we got to do
works.
it real quick.
Okay, so if we can kind of go through these. So from like the exhibition, the group exhibition, Seeing Sound.
Yes, also at Space Gallery.
At Space Gallery, where, as you see, it's like these kind of constructions of reeds and plant materials in fluff mud on the surface of that he knew would crack away. And
Yes.
this is the mud out in the creeks.
Right.
That he's got this current large suspended sculpture in his show.
Yeah,
The table with the globe covered with the same fluff.
right.
And
That will
we
do
could
the same
expect that
thing.
to age, certainly.
Yeah.
And the final piece, which is from, of course, the exhibition Spill.
The spill exhibitions
Yep.
about the Exxon disaster.
From that was here at Indigo Sky.
Right.
And so with here, once again, submerged canvas. And this is the kind of boom material used for
Right.
soaking up oil
Yeah,
that had been left out in and around the creeks here.
yeah.
And he's found these things, as well as the series of paintings that he created off of that.
Very good.
So it's a really nice kind of range and consistencies. But it was nice to be able to put the two approaches to his art together, I think, for other folks.
Well, thanks for bringing Henry Dean in. He seems like he's really into something,
He really, truly
to
is.
say the least.
It was my absolute pleasure.
Very seriously from the beginning, as long as I've known,
Yeah.
is being involved in this idea.
Very
these
good,
ideas.
very good. All right, so as we move along, Suzanne, let's see what you've been up to.
Well, I'm as crazy about nature as Henry is, I think. We're born at probably the same time of the year. I use and reuse materials, especially having moved here to Savannah almost 20 years ago now. I take every fragment, I save too many things probably, but I try to use everything that's in the studio so that I don't have to put it back into the environment. I've been really concerned about what happens with the acrylic paint going into the system. And I put pieces back in. And this is called Up From IC, which probably has to do with all the places I've lived in the world. That
Is that I
Ice.
see? Ice. Okay.
IC from the CSEA. So
Okay.
I don't know how some of these titles just come sometimes, but this also is acrylic and graphite and canvas and folded in piece. I've been doing a lot of folding and crimping of papers and pieces in finding them just as they are and
Okay.
putting them into the works. So this is one of the last pieces in January that I finished.
And what size is this?
Oh, it's small. It's about what is this? This is about 15 by 17 by 20 inches, maybe by 15 inches.
It's got quite a presence to it. I mean,
Yeah, and I'm known to work very large, so this is one of my small pieces. And I do actually, people just think I only work large, but I do very small works as well, which are really difficult. It's harder to do a small piece sometimes. Yeah. This piece was also, I was going through, I discovered I had many works on paper in the studio that I'd forgotten about and in portfolios. And these were actually sheets that were between the lithograph that I did in 1977. That was recently auctioned in New York, and the paper had moldy formations on it, and I decided to incorporate those, and I just read the spaces and the shapes that are on the paper and on the surface.
Okay.
But I also use coffee. I drink really strong coffee, and I decided to play with the coffee and graphite together on this. So there are two sheets of paper that have been reused, and then they're lined with cotton. So the work is all archival in the sense that it's it's also sealed with acrylic. This piece I've sealed, and the backing is also, it holds the papers together to give them strength. But I wanted to see what would happen with this, coffee and this paper that is no longer moldy from being in the studio. And this is called Fox Telling Muse.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for the title. Say it again.
Fox Telling Muse.
Okay.
And,
Yes.
and it's something which is what I was wondering about on this, which is how, I mean, with the titles coming in, do you start thinking about, like, there's a subject in there and you're going to imbue it with that? Or is it something where, like, your process is working out and you find that the subject makes itself known to you?
Yes, in these especially, it's especially working through the surface of the paper and allowing the paper to let me draw in a certain way on it, and use the surface, some of the surface marks that are there.
Yes.
That I just sort of play in those, and I'm beginning to find them and having fun. And no one can tell me I can't do it. So that's what I'm doing these
There you
days.
go.
You know? So, it's just having a good time with the materials. I mean, that's something that when I was younger, I was constantly working and having to have works ready for exhibitions. And since I've been in Savannah, I've just been able to work in the studio.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
All right, next one.
This is a piece that's taken several years to finish. It's Stonehenge paper, and there were pieces that were extra pieces left over in the studio, and I began to put them together, and it's all line, and it's called Ming's Line. Ming Cho Lee was my scenic thesis professor at grad school, and he was very tough about drawing and drawing and drawing, and also in drafting class, which I took 2 times because I love the idea of line, and I wanted to really perfect the drafted line. So what I'm doing now is trying to incorporate the drafted line into the fine arts, but also I added a kind of a gauzy cotton backing to this, because I'm always concerned about how these pieces are going to hold up. When I ship them, some of them can be rolled, some of them, and will they go back? They actually have memory, and they go back into shape, no matter how they're rolled up or folded. When they're hung, they go right into. You see, this comes off the wall.
So, well, 2 questions. This is actually physically folded, what we're looking at.
The bottom parts when I started adding the cotton backing, the gauzy cotton, it started doing things, and then I started crimping it when the acrylic was overlaid onto adhere the 2 together.
So dimensionality.
So this hangs about 4 to 6 inches off the wall.
Okay.
And so it moves sometimes with the humidity and the changes, and that's what I love about these. When I started working this way in the larger pieces, it's because I was dealing with humidity in Savannah.
Well, to the second question, you said Stonehenge paper for our viewing audience.
It's a heavy white drawing paper that comes very wide, anywhere 54 to 60 inches wide.
Okay.
Sometimes it has a nice deckled edge, like watercolor paper has a beautiful little ripply edge on it, or sometimes it's plain, and it's very wide, so I can work large, and sometimes I buy it like 12 yards at a time. I'm working on a drawing in the studio now that's about 12 feet long.
All right, well, let's move on.
Yeah. This is an installation view of the exhibition that I had in Brooklyn, at Temporary Agency. The piece behind Sung, who was a Korean artist, the young women who put this exhibition together were from Hunter College. Okay. And they were in one of those temporary spaces where the landlord can kick you out in any minute. And they did actually, after my show was the first solo show they'd done. And that piece, Woodpecker's Last Blues, was actually first shown here at Indigo Sky first. The piece to the left that you see just the edge is also another one of my experiments where that edge you see that's clear is all acrylic.
I see.
And at one point when it was hanging in the studio, it started hanging and sinking and getting longer. So I had some really beautiful silk netting, and it's actually I backed that piece. It's linen. It's actually acrylic on linen, and then the edge is all pure acrylic. So the idea in both of these is that I'm looking for the strength of pure acrylic paint.
I see.
And that's what's all those edges. It's paint.
Well, stylistically too. I mean, it starts to get into like this. I mean, the look of from one work to the other really changes quite a bit.
Yes.
You know, like the line work, for instance, is like an effortlessness I sort of see going in with that.
Even though
and with here, painful. With several of the other works, so it's you're really strong and prominent. It seems like with the forms and pieces as you're putting them together?
Well, I'm dealing with nature, but I'm also thinking about ancestry and moving to Savannah not expecting that I was going to come here and find out that I had ancestors who were from Savannah without knowing that. So in a sense, and I always thought that I was going to be working more figuratively, but then my response to the environment here, to people, has come out in this way, in the music relating to the work, music and nature.
Well, then let's go to the next one.
Okay. This
Since
is
you mentioned music.
Yes.
this is T-sphere monk. This was also an installation.
T-sphere monk.
Thelonious Sphere monk. Sphere, S-P-H-E-R-E is his middle name. And Thelonious Monk, since I was a young, when I was studying piano, I used to plunk around and I didn't want to do the regular supposed classical thing, and I didn't realize that maybe I'd heard Thelonious Monk. But this piece is an improvisation in the sense that those large areas of sort of chocolatey brown and the clear piece across are pure acrylic, and there's some netting suspending these pieces to hold them together. But I was really interested in layering the pure acrylic and also these other found pieces of studio paper and fabric in that on that shape, using an old taking the canvas off the stretcher bar and using that as a frame.
What gives the acrylic color?
The pigment in the paint. So that's pure sienna mixture, probably sienna and umber acrylic mixed. I may mix the colors to get a certain that grayish looking strip is pure. Nova Super Gel. I'm known for Nova Super Gel. It's this strong pigment that will hold a house together. And that's
okay.
Yeah, I believe in really making work. Even though, and I think I was asked by Betsy Kane at one point why it is that the work looks so sort of ragged and funky.
I remember that question.
Yes, but the work is well made, and that's my intention, that it still has the integrity and quality of a well-made piece of art.
Well, to say improvisation, like just to describe it that way, this is the first thing that was really coming to my mind too. And with improvisation, there's experiment, there's tries, and it's rough sometimes, and it's lyrical in times. And to also describe your process as to how these go together, it's as if it begins to set up like a precariousness as to what it seems like it's put together, but you know it's put together well. And so I think and that's an improvisation.
And it has to be put together well on the back as well as the front.
Right,
and that's part of my mother, made clothes, and the inside, and we're studying costume design, the inside has to be as beautiful as the outside. And that structure, that's there, the armature has to be well made.
Well, we need to move forward.
Okay.
So let's go through your
This is
remaining ones
from the
quickly.
model print series that actually I had a fellowship at SCAD to do a group of model prints, but I had a lot of rejects, and I learned how to reuse the rejects. And this one is called Toucan Negotiating Two Crows. And putting also pieces together.
I see the two crows.
Yeah, there's the two crows, and there's a toucan over there on the left side. And I was just playing with the shape of this, but also space, where at the bottom there's a line from the print, from the edge of the print, and then backing this, and it's another one of those things where the strength of this, where it moves away from the wall.
Okay.
So, I've taken things off the stretcher and out of frames, even though I do have some frame pieces. But I like the idea that the work can move away, and sometimes they hang almost like a tapestry away from the wall.
And is there another? Yes.
Oh, this is one of the last little ones. Sometimes just fooling around in the studio, but then the little ones that you kind of get to play with. And this is graphite and acrylic. And it's called Voiding Petitions. And there's a couple of odd little figures in there. It's almost as if
I see a dog in there, so
okay.
maybe that's just me.
There is a funny looking dog in shape, but there's a little man in there, and there's another man over here. It's almost like trying to climb Everest. in a sense. But it's all the things that happen in the world, that are going on. I think a lot of my responses in some of these titles have to do with what I'm listening to on the radio, what I'm reading constantly. So they're abstracted. But I was also interested in how do people think. I would see people passing by on the street, and I was more concerned with how are they thinking? What are they thinking about? And even if they look like simple people, their thoughts are probably complex.
So you're almost manifesting these things almost like in real time, it seems, as you develop some of this.
And speaking of real time,
It's time to move on.
we do have to move on. Who have you brought in for us to
Well, an artist,
look out?
Jerome asked me to find, he said that we were featuring artists, who were actually in the community doing things. And this is work by William Kwamena Pom. And we see William everywhere at all the exhibitions. He supports all the artists. He has a studio in City Market. He is now showing work at Gallery 209 on River Street, which is a collective of a lot of artists, which is a very nice space. It's like I would never have expected that I would have made this choice. But I looked at his work and I realized that he's working in gouache. Gouache is an opaque medium. We know about watercolor. Watercolor is transparent, translucent looking. So he works with gouache and watercolor, and he makes prints. And I'm just, after looking at his work and realizing how he is able to accomplish most beautiful applications of the gouache, which is opaque and a hard medium to work with because it can get bubbles in it and it can be pretty pasty looking. But he actually has learned to manipulate, and he's a self-taught artist. His father came to the United States as a professor at Tuscaloosa College, and he brought William.
From Ghana?
Yes, he was able to bring two people, and his mother didn't want to come, so he brought his two sons. And William said, I was the one who was floundering. So he taught himself to paint, and he said at first he was doing things that people said their kids could do that. So then he started really applying himself in. And he moves around and travels. So it's a little bit different from the way I work. I'm always in the studio. Yeah. He actually is out he's in Maryland right now, selling his work. So I thought it was interesting because he goes to Ghana. He just came back from Ghana. He photographs his family.
Let's see the next image. Cause
he photographs, there he is in the studio. And I thought this was a good, look at all of his awards are up there at the top, which I thought was interesting. Totally different from the way, I would work as an artist, but there he is. He's actually working on the watercolors in his studio, which I work times like that as well. His work is more realistic, but he actually takes photographs and then he comes back and uses those as a reference and works freehand to establish a whole new idea or to change the images in the work.
And his studio is
in City Market.
In City Market. Okay.
He mats his own work. He's very meticulous about how he presents the work, which I think is important, especially an artist who is out trying to sell his work. And he said at one point when they moved to New York, his family, all their things were stolen from the car, including his passport, which made him illegal. So he had to figure out something to do. Okay. But it was during Reagan time, and he was able to, get legal again. So he's been here a long time, since if he was here since Reagan, and working and traveling. So we should go into the next one, because this is the piece that I really was struck by when I saw it. And it has that quality of being a print, being the serigraph. But originally this was a gouache. He said when he went back to Ghana this summer, that building is gone. And the man is actually holding a baby, which I didn't see at first. Okay. And I was just struck by the women and the way that the placement of those women, and then sort of blocking of color. And this is where, with gouache, you see more of that flat, opaque color, as opposed to down at the bottom. It has more of a washy,
and because of that, I mean, look how dominant that yellow structure is.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, not only because of where it's placed, the intensity of the color, but compared to the treatment of the material, the medium, down at the bottom.
Where the translucency of the watercolor next to the flat shapes of the gouache.
Well, it's a real bold visual statement. I mean, and also trying to get a handle on that. I mean, take into account, well, first off, these are probably Ghanaese colors as far as what he would I mean, like going back, and really playing that up, but that saturation of the brilliance of the colors
against the white.
against that white, but then you get those green of the shutters on the left, and then the
which is a
little
nice
bit of plant
counterbalance.
life like up on top. So there's this balancing off that's happening.
For me, this
And
could
there's
also
no-
be Savannah. Because
Yeah, that's
so
what I
many
think
people-
about William's work in general.
It-
You know,
because
his
he's
reference to the
moving- he's
sea
Like
and
crosses.
Yeah.
yeah,
He's
Process
going back
culture.
home, and so many of us are here trying to, thinking about going back home, but he's also bringing home here for
Yeah.
the people who have ancestors, and it's not that much different, that could be Savannah very easily.
yeah,
And especially since so many things are disappearing, so many buildings
Right.
and businesses. We should go to the next one. This is the fisherman. This is so incredible that it's gouache, because my experience with gouache is that it's just a hard, flat, and most artists use gouache as if it's watercolor. We don't know that we're supposed to make it flat because that's how they make textile designs. But also these fishermen are important because they are also where they fish. Now he said they fish freely. This is where many African Americans in the United States were actually, their ancestors were brought from this part of Ghana to the States. And he says each of these boats will have an Indinkra symbol on it, which may represent freedom or hope. And they don't fish on Tuesdays because that's part of being respectful to the sea and not polluting. So I thought that was, but these, the way he paints the skin, and it's really gorgeous. And
Well, it's also interesting compositionally because he has a figure dead center in this composition, and yet you don't get caught there.
because of that big wave of
And
the
then the curvature
sail,
of the boats themselves.
Just the layering of subject matter. First off, just the handling and creating the kind of representation with this media.
Yes.
I mean, that's a
pretty
mastery.
incredible when you think about it.
It's
Yeah.
really mastery.
Yeah.
And but also dealing, if you sort of see this too, I mean, there's a lot of monochromatic qualities. It's like just these various tints and shades going through the browns and trying to make the distinctions in all of that.
You mean spatially and
Spatially
otherwise?
and like distinguishment of subject matter.
Yes, good point.
And then it's like zapping in these little pieces of color within this also. But that's, I think, an excellent point about like central figure, but the balance off on this is just really working so well. I really enjoy these two figures on the left.
Yes.
I mean, they just pop off of there against that whitewash.
Yeah, and they direct you out into the sea.
It
To
truly,
us
yeah.
over here.
I know.
This side
They
of
direct you out into the
world.
sea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Very nice.
beautiful narrative that you can
It
really just think about like, in this particular work.
Very good.
I think it's important for people to know this is how many artists do. Someone said people who are abstract artists don't know how to draw. But in order to become an abstract artist, you have to start in this place.
You have to draw.
The very term abstraction means you're taking away from
You're
something.
taking away from. But the fact that he maintains in this, because he said this is what's really important to him, and people love his work. So,
All right, let's see more of it. That's it for William.
all right.
Okay.
I thought we had another one. Okay.
All right. Well, that puts us ahead of ourselves. Okay, so this is by way of an announcement for an exhibition that will be opening here at Indigo Sky, a memorial exhibition regarding the passing away of one of our beloved artists, Pat Walker. And the Georgia Southern University College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Betty Foy Sanders Department of Art, is presenting Patricia Walker Works from the Studio, a memorial exhibition showcasing Pat Walker's work, 1949 to 2015, when she passed away. She was professor emeritus at Georgia Southern University, and the exhibition again is on view from October 10th through November 8th here at Indigo Sky Community Gallery, 915 Waters Avenue. The gallery will be open each Saturday from 11 to 4 p.m. and Sunday from 1 to 4 p.m. And there will be a closing reception on November 8th from 1 to 4. The exhibition will be closed for Halloween on October 31st. So if we can go to the next image. The works that will be on display are spanning over 35 years of Pat's artistic life, including a great deal of work that has not been exhibited before. Included will be a wide range of mediums, from large oil paintings and pastels to very affordable small watercolor studies and pencil sketches, along with giclées. And for those of you who don't know, it's a high-quality copy of work printed on canvas, making it archival, as well as photography. And all of the work will be on sale, with the proceeds going to help endow the Pat Walker Scholarship in Painting, which will provide needed financial support for painting students in the Department of Art at Georgia Southern University. And to give you a sense of Pat's own inspiration for her work, if we can go to the next one. This is, I'm quoting from Pat's statement she made in 2012. Both Sapelo Island and Osaba Island, where I have been allowed opportunities to stay and work, are filled with abundant southern vegetation that is a mix of subtropical and temperate plant life. These islands have very few inhabitants. The rich, diverse textures of vines and bark, of leaves and sky are perfect vehicles for me to explore personal iconography. Simply making a copy of scenery does not motivate me. My interest lies in compositionally rearranging the forms found on these islands in an attempt to create a metaphor for the sensations that are present as I work. The wind blowing, the taste of sea salt, the cool depth of shadows, my apprehension in the forest, and the intrinsic spiritual impact present in nature are transformed into marks and colors. Very poignant statements.
So many mixed medias, it sounds like, that she chooses to work with.
Yes.
With her particular work.
Yeah.
On this. Just a wonderful movement, wonderful abstracted floral pieces on this. I mean, there's...
Well, this piece is quite striking.
Yeah, it's like as if it's in constant motion, I think, with it.
Yes.
I find it that between some of the mark makings and even some of her rationale, it sort of figures in a bit to Henry Dean's work, when he's in the studio.
Interesting.
Okay,
so you're seeing that connection.
It's noticeable.
Okay.
Especially in some of the ways that the work that she produces.
Okay.
On this.
If we can go, if we can go back to the first one. Yes, because Suzanne, you were saying this is more of what you think of Pat's work.
And maybe it's because Pat was a very generous and kind person, and this is that inner quality that if to meet her, you would not have realized that this strong emotional statement might come from, as a really gentle, person.
It does stand out from the others.
But it also makes sense relative to Osaba Island and Sapelo, because those were my two favorite islands as well when I first moved here, and the energy and movement, and in the sense, relating to Henry and the calligraphic movement, the dancing that's there in the piece. I just love the energy and the juxtaposition of color.
Well, let's be mindful of the title. Abstraction, Listening to Coltrane.
Oh, okay. I didn't even see that.
This isn't necessarily also about.
Okay, that must be it. That must be the reason I was attracted to that piece.
Coltrane.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a great deal of sense. Okay.
With the musical connections with a good number of your works too.
Exactly.
That there's an immediacy there.
Mm-hmm.
Having the music on all the time, I'm quite, sometimes it's absolutely quiet in the studio, and other times the music really helps us, drives us, in directions, and so
Yeah.
that's fascinating. I didn't have my glasses on, so I didn't see that.
Well, it's also curious because the medium is pastel and gouache.
Yeah,
Gouache shows up
that's
again.
right. That opaque medium that's very strong. You can see in the blue, especially in the red, that pastel on top.
Yeah.
Of
Oh,
the
yeah.
gouache.
But it's very dynamic. It does have a sense of an immediacy about it.
Oh,
an
it's
urgency.
charged.
An
It's
urgency.
absolutely charged. And, I mean, it's almost dissonant with the kind of color used too, with these
Yeah, that's true, too.
reds and the blues just kind of mashed together.
But as an artist, gouache can make you very mad. So it's like this place where you really want to go over it with oil pastel and have a good time.
Well, it seems as though William has developed a working relationship
Yes,
with
he
it.
has. I'd probably end up doing the same to gouache. Yeah.
Well, if we can go back in sequence to, this is actually the piece that is on the announcement and will be featured in the exhibition, although this one is not for sale. But the title is Palmetto Bark, and this is also pastel and gouache. What do you think of this?
I love that zigzaggy line that's going through the center that separates and then goes up around that leaf. There's something about that leading the eye into the piece, and that's sort of inviting and warm. This is almost like, and I guess because I stare at nature all day long, I have big windows from my studio, and I'm just really enthralled by what happens out, and this piece gives me that feeling of how you can be wrapped in a leaf or in the turn of pieces in nature throughout the day.
Well, this has like a real, it's more like a slowing down, flowing quality compared to the first work.
Coltrane piece.
Yes. So, I mean, in a circumstance like this, the thing that I also respond to is modulated color. Like within, different kind of shapes appearing through there, where there's the yellows, the oranges, the pinks, and they're just sort of mixing and flowing through, and the character changes a bit from one place to another.
Yes.
And for me, that's really knits it together as far as like the kind of cohesion that I see it. So, and also just the whole general warmth of it because of the colorations on this. So it's sort of like staying within that range, and I think that goes a long way to kind of like the feel of it. So even though there's like it gets kind of jagged and zigzaggy in there, I just feel comfortable.
It's as if things are being cradled and bursting, through, but held together, almost like being in a cradle or being wrapped in a blanket, little babies.
That's what abstraction can give you.
Well, I think it's a wonderful example of how we as artists have a range of styles and expressions that we can work with, and so you look at this in terms of Asaba, and then you look at the Coltrane piece in terms of the influence being jazz. Same artist,
Yes.
but responding to these different energies and making each of them her own.
I think it's really important for people to understand that, because I was thinking about it this morning about how people see an exhibition, they think maybe they're going to see the same thing, or versions of the same. But sometimes I think it's really important for the artist to be able to just respond at the moment. And some of these things hidden away in the studio are the pieces that tell the truth about who we are.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that in the remaining moments. John, her widower, was explaining how as they've been going through the studio, discovering an abundance of work. I mean, just huge quantities of work dating back again for those 35 years. We produce. It's not always producing for a show. It's producing to produce, and we amass this abundance of
these
work.
step-by-step progressions that happen with this.
Yeah.
And where you can really see where do you change. What are you using as your influence to sort of take the next step. In the process of being, really. And being sensitized to that. That's an artist.
That's an artist.
Yeah.
Well, very good. This has been wonderful, and we're coming to the end of this episode.
Well, it's always a pleasure being with like two of my favorite artists.
All right,
certainly
very good.
here. So,
Thank you.
for
Thank
inviting
you,
me.
Chris.
This
It's
was
been a
fun.
pleasure having you, Suzanne. And at this point, again, this is our second episode, and we have yet to determine who our guest will be for the third episode, although Chris will be back. I don't know if you want to announce who you will be showcasing.
we'll be talking about the artist Chris Ozuski. He's also a foundation studies professor at SCAD, and he really takes the idea of travel and culture and mixed medias to points in a really unique manner. So that will be a wonderful thing.
Okay, and I do
talk
have
about.
one more. If I can sort through these papers. One more announcement. Savannah Stage Company, which rehearses here at Indigo Sky, is putting on The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It will be at Ampersand. It opens on October 9th, and will run every weekend through October through Halloween. Connection there, Sleepy Hollow, Halloween. And again, I would strongly suggest that you go to their website, Savannah Stage Company, for purchasing tickets and to find out more about what these folks are doing theatrically. So with that said, thank you for being with us, and hope you enjoyed.